In recent years, private equity firms have been at the center of numerous stories about beloved businesses and brands facing bankruptcy or financial ruin. Examples are plenty: Toys R Us, Payless Shoes, Sears, and more recently, Red Lobster, just to name a few. But the story doesn't just end with large corporations. Small businesses all across America too have been caught in the crosshairs of private equity, with oftentimes devastating effects for the owners of these small businesses and the communities in which they serve. Recently, I traveled to Maryland to meet Tiffany Cianci, a small business owner whose franchise was destroyed as part of a hostile takeover by private equity, and today she is organizing a movement to fight back against Wall Street's takeover of Main Street. Tiffany, welcome to Breaking Point. I guess the first place to start is maybe if you could share a little bit about your background and your business before the takeover.
Sure. I was a franchisee starting in 2017 with a business called The Little Gym. I had a really high-powered career before that had me traveling a lot, and I was looking for a business opportunity where I could bring my kids to work. I'd been missing out on a lot of their childhood, and I just really wanted something that was like family focused, and it felt like the right fit for our family at the time. But during COVID, we were among the types of businesses that were most harmed by lockdowns. My particular business in my county was shuttered for 17 months almost. All of the little gyms across the United States suffered to varying degrees, and with it, our corporate office suffered too. And it left them open to a hostile takeover.
So then after private equity took over, can you tell us a little bit about maybe the financial strategies or the decisions they made that made running the business more difficult?
Sure. Yeah. When the takeover started happening, they lied to us about it. They didn't actually say they were taking over the business. They were introduced to us as a marketing partner. They came in a very underhanded way. And we were very excited because coming out of COVID, we needed good marketing. They said they were going to be this amazing asset to us, this resource, and that we were going to share marketing with their small businesses they already owned. They said they served children and that we were going to share like mailing lists. At no point did they say, we just bought your company. All of a sudden, one day, we were all asked to get on a system-wide call. We log in, everybody's crying, their eyes are all red. And this guy named Michael Browning walks in and goes, "Hey, everybody, I'm your new CEO." One of our former silent investors introduced him and said, "I'm making changes. I have sold all my stakes." And we were informed that they had fired like everyone on our board in a day, just gone. And immediately after they took over, sort of everything familial or friendly or comfortable about the way that they managed or governed us changed, like just with a furious pace. Right away, all of those promises from our corporate office that we'd have payment plans if we hadn't paid our royalties were set aside. And they told us we had to take out loans to pay them back immediately. And I went and took out a loan and paid them back huge amounts of money, like $40,000. During that process was that separate processes were happening. Immediately, we got told that we needed to change the way we were paying our corporate office. They said, we don't want to use their financial processes. We need to integrate you guys. So we're going to send you this new ACH agreement. It's just so you can pay your royalties in a way that works with our software. Don't worry about it. Just sign it and send it back. They presented it as this very nonchalant thing. But when I went to my husband, who's an attorney, and our friends who were attorneys and had them look at it, they told me it was a vast expansion of their rights and a vast reduction in our rights. It actually rewrote our contract and changed all of the provisions that mattered for our protection when it came to finances. They presented it as a nothing burger. And most of the franchisees immediately started signing it and sending it back because they'd had trust in our company for a long time. And they didn't understand that there was a risk. So they started signing it. I immediately said, whoa, 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 whoa. We should not be doing this. Everyone go get a lawyer. Everyone get advice. At the same time, they introduced another new initiative. The new initiative said that we were going to have options to help us save money on our payroll by lessening our burden at the desk. They were going to get us access to a call center that would field calls so that we wouldn't answer the phones anymore, which sounded insane. If a family calls and says, hey, I have an 18-month-old who has delays and is on the spectrum, and I need to know what teacher might be best suited for his particular needs and what class has the smallest class size. Do we need to move outside of his regular appointed age group? There's no call center that can answer that for them, right? Like, it's a very personalized thing we offer. We hold human lives in our hands. We spin babies around bars and flip them over our heads. And like, if you don't know a lot, you shouldn't be talking about those types of nuances. And so we were right away very turned off by the idea. We were more turned off by the fact that they wouldn't tell us how much it was going to cost. So we got together and we formed a franchisee association where we could pool our resources, because we were small businesses coming out of COVID. We were broke. And nobody really gets into serving children because you want to get rich. We do it because of the communities. The average franchisee makes, $50,000 a year, 51,000 in the United States, and works an average of 65 to 70 hours a week. You don't go into this business to get rich. And so we had few resources. But if we pooled them, we felt like we could afford good legal counsel to protect our interests and to advise us. And so that's what we did. When we had the contracts reviewed, it became very clear that the new contract they were forcing us to sign for the call center was actually a rewrite of our former contract. It actually said in tiny fine print at the bottom that it would become the new governing document in our franchise agreement.
Is that legal to do what they're, it seems like people don't know what they're signing. I think that's not,
So
it's a gray area at the very least.
it's not really a gray area. In the state of California, changing anything about the fundamentals of a franchise agreement requires the issue of something called a mini FDD. They didn't give one to any of the California franchisees. Illinois has some similar standards. They didn't do it in Illinois. But really, it's just underhanded, right? Like, they were trying to trick people into not knowing their options. There came a point where the test group of people was on a call, and I was called to listen in on that call. I was not invited. I was listening in. I was on speakerphone while the call was taking place, and I heard the corporate office. They called me because I was the only one married to an attorney that was in the franchise community, and they were scared. At this call, they told them, you have to sign this document now on the call. And they said, do we get to show it to a lawyer? They're like, no, absolutely not. You need to do it now or you're out. They're like, out? And they said, that's right. You'll be removed from the test groups. You'll be removed from any of your committee placements. And we will not take it pleasantly if you don't sign this now.
So then what happened to your franchise?
Well, when we started forming the franchisee association, I got lawyers to come and advise everybody. And while it was too late to stop everyone from signing the ACH agreement, except the ones that hadn't done it yet, which was a small percentage, myself included, we were in time to stop everyone from signing the new agreement about the call center. And we decided to get an attorney to advise us, and we waged a blockade. So we got our law firm to draft a letter and send it to them saying, we are enacting the mediation clause in our franchise agreement on behalf of 200 franchisees. And we are demanding that you stop threatening people outside the allowances of their contract. And we take this very seriously. We are demanding you immediately come to mediation so we can talk about these issues and you can understand them better. And the day after they got the letter, they terminated my contract to make an example out of me. The next day, my law firm called it the most egregious example of retaliation they'd ever seen in their 30 years of franchise law.
Wow. So what's happened since then?
They terminated my contract to terrify 270 other small business owners. When that didn't work and they continued to stand together, they needed to hurt us another way. So instead, they sent out a letter to all those small business owners from their lawyer. He was later found guilty of defamation for this letter, but in it, they accused me of abuse of my customers, abuse of children, abuse of minor employees. They accused me of funneling money for my personal gain from the union. They accused me of owing tens of thousands of dollars to our corporate office, even though they never claimed in court I owed them $1 because I did not. It was found I owed them nothing ever. And that created enough disbelief in our union to break it up into 3 parts. They lost all of their bargaining power. And ultimately, a bunch of different lawsuits were filed, and everybody ended up losing just about everything. Right? That was one example. In other ways that they wanted to make examples out of me, they wanted to show that nothing is permanent and that your relationships don't matter. So they went to the landlord I had a very good relationship with, and they paid him $120,000 to kick me out of my building so that my business couldn't stay. because I tried to rebrand and rebuild myself as something different that didn't compete with them so that my students could still be served. After that, they exploited all of my relationships that were left of all of the small business owners that were supporting me and sent them letters threatening them and saying if they didn't withdraw their support, their offers to testify for me, that they would be next. They published press releases telling everyone what was happening to me and how much they were spending. They hired private investigators to stalk all of my employees, terrorize them. In the most egregious instance, there was a point in most journalists don't like to talk about this, but where I was going through a difficult pregnancy during my case, and they filed motions when it became clear that the stress was too much. I went to the court and we asked for a 2-week ceasefire to get my blood pressure to come down so that my pregnancy could stabilize. I was not doing well. I had something called a subchorionic hematoma. That meant that when I had high blood pressure, I could bleed a lot. And when we told them and gave them the medical records to prove it so I could get a ceasefire, they increased their filings against me. Knowing I was the only one that could respond because I was the only litigant and I was the only witness. They threatened me with all of these actions if I didn't keep producing documents and keep showing up for all these cases. And then when I was put on bed rest, they issued a subpoena to force me to fly to Arizona even though I was on a no travel bed rest. The stress of all of that pushed me to a point where I went into early labor. And when that happened, they filed a motion to compel me to be produced bedside in labor for a deposition. While I was trying to stop the labor and save my pregnancy, they wanted me produced for 18 hours of depositions, bedside in labor. And when that didn't work, they filed a motion to compel me to expedite the scheduling of an abortion against my will, against my religious beliefs. Because, hey, I was probably going to lose the baby anyway, right? So it didn't matter if it was against my beliefs. Personally, I'm pro-choice for others. I was pro-life for myself. And they filed those motions to compel. Ultimately, they did depose me while I was still having contractions, still in labor pains. And the footage of it is horrific. When I go back and look at it now, I don't even know how anyone could do the things that were so inhuman that they did.
I mean, we hear all the time from politicians, especially during election season, which is happening right now, how important small businesses are to America. It's the bedrock. We hear this all the time. It's the bedrock, but it seems like all this stuff, all the practices that you just talked about is anti-small business, pro-big business. So I'm curious, like, what is the broader implication of this for America?
These private equity funds are acquiring these small businesses en masse, okay? All across the US. They're paying for name, image, likeness contracts so that these small businesses they're acquiring still look like small businesses for a decade. And then they are using small businesses to extract wealth. And the moment you give your money to these acquired businesses in veterinary care, funeral homes, nursing homes, children's services, sports leagues, I mean, grocery chains, it's really daycare centers, my heavens, private schools. The moment you give your money to these companies, it is leaving your community. There is not a dollar coming back that's not underpaid wages or exploitative overcharging, right? That money is being funneled to a billionaire with an offshore account. It is never coming back to your community. Never. And that is why Main Street is dying. That is why our communities are dying. That is why our wealth is dying. It's because capitalism, in a pure sense, is actually a really great system. A lot of people don't like when I say that. But a free market is a great system when it works. It's meant to be an hourglass, okay? It's meant to have money funneled up through payment systems, right? Through all these small businesses and all of these big businesses up to the top, and it sprinkles out in different directions, right? A bunch of it rains back down. It rains back down in reinvestment in communities. It rains back down in building new factories, in raising wages. It rains back down in product expansions that lead to reinvestments in communities. It rains back down in investing in sports leagues. It rains back down in all kinds of ways. But right now, we don't have an hourglass. Instead, we have a reverse like a reverse tornado funnel, where it's spinning all of the money out of the communities and it's driving it into this pocket, and none of it's raining back down. And the more that money is funneled in the direction of the handful of just these few billionaires and away from all of the small businesses and all of the everyday Americans in our communities, the more that capitalism is going to suffer, the more bailouts are going to be required, because people are going to keep suffering. Small businesses are going to keep suffering. And ultimately, as these private equity funds fail through their greed and their bad investments and their debt loading, pensions are going to suffer. And if you want to know why nobody's going to hold them to account, it's because the government will always bail out the pensions. Always. So they have no risk that anyone's ever going to hold them to account. And the more bailouts have to happen, the more money has to be printed. The more money has to be printed, the less value our money has. And so the next crisis requires more money printing, and it's creating exponentially growing devaluation of the American dollar for everyday Americans. Our legislators are complicit in it. They're investing in these companies through insider trading. They're taking donations from these private equity funds and these lobbyists. And they're so dependent on it, right? The average legislator has to raise $13,600 a day if they want to get reelected right now. If you can't afford those bills, your legislators have turned their back on you. So only vote for legislators that promise. A lot of them will say, I don't take corporate PAC money. That's a really nice way of saying you do take PAC money. You just don't take corporate PAC money. It's a nice way of saying you still take corporate donations. It's a nice way of saying as long as it's funneled through a nonprofit trade organization, you take that PAC money, right? So a lot of these politicians are trying to convince people they're not on the take. They are. They absolutely are. You need to find the politicians that say, I only take small donor money. I only take constituent money. We need to lift up those politicians. We need to expand their voices. They can't afford the marketing. We need to give them voice, and we need to give them votes. And we need to hold them to account when they get there. Because man, is it seductive.
If you're not a small business, if you're talking to the regular consumer, what can I do to help stop this onslaught of private equity taking over Main Street?
Everyday Americans can do a couple of things. One, lift up the small businesses in your community. Seek them out. Don't look for the shiny marketing. Don't look for the glossy ad campaigns. Listen to referrals from your neighbors. Look for people that are on social media just trying to get a foothold. Don't look for the ones with the big followings, right? Go find the small businesses and lift them up. But you also have to ask hard questions. If you're looking for a vet, ask, have you been acquired by private equity? Who owns you? Who owns you? Ask that when you're going to seek out a business. Don't be afraid to ask it, right? Do those small things. And for businesses that are being acquired by private equity, stop giving them money. It's hard to believe that that's the best course of action, but it is, right? One example that we have is that we're actually creating an initiative right now. There is a small business franchise, Jersey Mike's. Now, Jersey Mike's is got about 1,400 restaurants in the United States. They're one of the last franchises that has never screwed over their franchisees, never. They've been so good to them every step of the way. They've been so good to their communities. They've stayed family operated. They've stayed family led, founder led, right? Whenever their franchisees have suffered, they've suffered with them. They've always tightened their own belt. The franchisees had to tighten their belt when they needed to create new innovation. They have funded the innovation for the franchisees instead of making money off of that innovation by exploiting the franchisees through kickbacks and stuff. And right now, Blackstone, one of the darkest private equity funds in the world, is trying to force them to sell. And they're the largest acquirer of single-family homes in the U.S. They're literally, not single-handedly, but very largely responsible for Americans not being able to afford housing right now. And they're coming for food to try to prop up their bad housing and commercial real estate investments. And they're trying to force Jersey Mike's to sell. And so right now, we've created an initiative called Save Jersey Mike's. It's www.savejerseymikes.com. We have Save Jersey Mike's on every social media platform. And all we're asking you to do is go out there and eat a sandwich and post a video tagging at Save Jersey Mike's, hashtag Save Jersey Mike's, and tell Jersey Mike's why you want them to stay a business that cares about their small business owners and cares about their communities. Because right now, Jersey Mike's has massive fundraisers every year and gives back to all their communities. They give back to charities all across the United States. Private equity eliminates that stuff immediately, right? That's the first things to go. Their small business franchisees are going to be sacrificed next through exploitative fees, kickback schemes, forced renovations, right? So we want to save. We want to prove if you can save one company from private equity, we can reproduce that and save more companies. And I think the private equity fund will probably come for me for this. But I believe in Jersey Mike's. I believe in what they've stood for. I have held them out as a beacon of what it can be to see a business protect their franchisees from private equity and the exploitation that comes with it. And so I hope everyday consumers go out all summer long and just eat sandwiches and tell Jersey Mike's, I'm not here because you're Jersey Mike's. I'm here because you belong in my community, and I want you to stay this beacon in my community of small businesses and giving back. And you can't do that if you sell it to private equity. So no private equity, save Jersey Mike's.
I mean, we can do that. We can go get We can go get a sandwich to stop Blackstone from taking over a sandwich shop. I think Subway was just required by Rourke a few months ago, I want to say. So I think this is the last remaining beacon.
Oh, Jimmy John's was also bought by Rourke. They're creating a little monopoly.
Wow. Tiffany, that was, thank you for sitting down with me today. A lot of that, what we heard today was extremely disturbing. It kind of makes us all feel like, hey, there's no hope, but as you said,
there is hope.
There is hope. And everybody go follow Tiffany and go support your small businesses.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
If you're looking for more stories that the mainstream media is unwilling to cover, please check out and subscribe to my YouTube channel, 5149 with James Lee. The link will be in the description below. As always, thank you for your time today, and keep on tuning into Breaking Points.